Soul Night Live, number 33. Today, our guest is Trevor Rabin.
Hello.
Hey, Trevor. This is Sean. How are you?
Hi, Sean. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for taking the time to chat with me today.
Sure.
Really excited to go over a few things with you. So thank you. All right. Well, I was curious, for starters, what you've been up to lately and how you've been spending your days in this rather unusual time.
Well, it's quite unusual that a week before I had decided I'm going to be working full steam on a new album, a solo album, and a week before the virus, or should I say the lockdown started, I was phoned by Renny Harlin, who's a great director who I'd done a number of films with, The Exorcist, Deep Blue Sea, a number of films and others. And he said, I really want you to do this movie with me. And he was calling from China where he was. And I said, well, I'm actually concentrating on something else right now. And I really had decided I wasn't going to do any film work for a while. And then he called again and came and had a meeting with me a couple of days later when he was in town. And I really liked the guy and I liked working with him. So I thought, well, a couple of months isn't going to really affect things too much. So I just, he convinced me and I went ahead and did this film with him. And almost to the day when the lockdown started is when I started the film. So it was really an unusual experience because I literally sat in the studio alone. It was supposed to be an orchestral score, but we couldn't work with orchestra because of the pandemic. So I did it completely electronically, and it was a real strange experience, just basically sitting alone doing it at home. And my assistant and music editor would be at their place working, so I was literally alone from start to finish. And I finished that recently, and I'm back on my album.
Excellent. Okay. Is there any way you could tell us the title of the film so we can keep an eye out for it?
The Misfits.
The Misfits?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll keep an eye out. The solo album. Now, this is more of a follow-up to Can't Look Away. Am I right? It's a vocal album.
Yeah, that's exactly correct.
Okay.
Actually, I would call it a follow-up to the Yes Talk album, a variation, not a variation, a follow-on from Talk Stroke Can't Look Away.
Okay, well, the fans will love that. That's awesome. How far along?
I hope so.
Yeah, how far along have you gotten on it?
I would say I'm beyond halfway there. I've been doing bits and pieces. Obviously, once ARW started, I stopped doing film for that period, and have continued until this film came along. So, but prior to that, while I was working on film after film, and I barely had time to breathe for the last 12 years while doing film before ARW. At any given time, when I had some free time in between movies, or there was just time I had because I was somewhat ahead, I would write and record. And so I have been doing it for a long time, but never really with the focus of finishing it, or just if I got an idea, I'd say, oh God, I got to do this. And so I've never really stopped trying to do stuff, but obviously the music was severely curtailed because I was doing films, so I didn't have time. But now that I've been focusing on it, I would say I'm about 2/3 of the way there. Although every time I finish something, I come up with a new idea. So I suppose I could say that I have enough to be completed at this point, but I keep writing new stuff and stuff that I think would fit in better. So I hope that doesn't continue infinitely.
And how would you describe it musically? Are there any sort of epic proggy moments in there, or is it more shorter songs, or maybe a mixture of both?
Well, even the short songs are pretty long, but there is one or two tracks that have that kind of feel to it. But I'm really not doing the album with a view of restricting myself to a specific genre because I know, I mean, Rick Wakeman just did a wonderful album, Mars, and
the Red Planet.
Red Planet, exactly. And that's very specifically prog rock, and it's an instrumental album, whereas this is a vocal album. But I will be integrating that, it's whatever fits will come into the album. But there's definitely going to be some kind of epic things, but there's also going to be some, just regular songs that I'm really committed to, but even those have turned out to be quite long anyway.
Were any of these things that you had earmarked for the ARW album that didn't come to fruition?
No, there's been some songs that I started specifically for ARW, and actually John came in and did some vocals on them, and we were getting ready for that, but it just never turned out, because once we started, the idea was to do some touring and then get into recording. And because of our geographical problems, that became an issue. But more importantly, I think, the fact that the touring just became constant. And had we not enjoyed it, we would have said, look, we would have not just agreed to these shows that were coming up. The idea at first was to do maybe a dozen shows and have some fun with it, and then look at recording something. But the dozen shows kind of went well, but turned into hundreds of shows.
Sure. Well, just the wonder of having you guys back together. I could see them putting you on the road for a couple of years quite happily, but obviously you guys have other things to do.
And frankly, we really enjoyed it. And, from the last day of the Union album, Rick and I kind of committed ourselves to, a bucket list thing that we have to work together again. Rick and I are actually still talking about doing an album together, just piano, guitar. That's a feeling that we've had from the end of Union. And, Rick and I have just remained such strong allies and have a deep friendship, both personally and musically.
But yeah, well, I think you guys really complement each other greatly, and that's really obvious on stage as well. I'm curious, how many songs were in the works for the ARW album that got shelved? I know Rick had one that he wound up putting on his Mars album.
Yeah, the Bolero is on the album, which was a great idea, which I'm glad he put it on the album, because it was a really great idea. And I think he was right to put it on the album, because it ultimately changed into something a little different, but I think it would have probably landed up somewhat still prog rocky. But beyond that, there was 2 or 3 pretty strong kind of epic ideas, which we muddled around with. But, the tour just took everything out of us.
Oh, I can imagine. Okay. Do you think that those songs might ever get resurrected and a proper ARW album happen? It's funny, I chat with John a few weeks ago, and he says would love to do more ARW, but there'd have to be a new album.
Well, no, that's kind of a little different to the way I think. I don't think there'll be another ARW situation. I don't think the album even comes into it.
So it's kind of dead in the water at this point?
I think so. I mean, I'm just being honest,
Sure.
If I thought something was going to happen, there's no reason why it shouldn't happen. But obviously, with the epidemic the way it is, I don't see it happening. And I really want to get my album done, which I've been kind of wanting to do for years, and it's really becoming ridiculous. I really want to get it done, and that's really my first desire. As far as I heard talk of, or an interview somewhere where there was talk of maybe a reunion, and that's something that will never happen, not with me.
Are you talking like another Union kind of tour with the other Yes camp?
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. I don't even think there should be a band with the name Yes without Chris Squire in it. It's like Zeppelin without John Bonham. It's not Zeppelin. And they had the self-respect to make sure that was the way it will remain. So that's why. I mean, they started calling it ARW, but both recognize Desire was, call it ARW, it's not Yes.
Sure.
Although it is, because the only music we play is Yes music.
I mean, it is a Yes, you know,
Sure.
at least to the fans, I think. I mean, I think that my ticket stub said ARW, but I count that concert among my Yes shows I've seen, you know.
No, absolutely, but I just think it's respect to Chris. That's just my opinion. Obviously, there's an existing band with Steve Howe and his friends, but it's not the way I look at it.
Oh, I understand. And I think a lot of the fan base they have all these fantasies about putting Yes together in certain configurations. And it's just like, I just think, just let it be. Yes has given us more than most groups, decades worth of wonderful music and albums and shows. And
well, that's the way I think. But, at the same time, I respect other people's views. And if they decide to do it, I don't know how it could possibly be done, because the only remaining legitimate Yes members were obviously Alan and Steve, and then from our band, the three of us. And without Chris, it's not the same, and wouldn't be something that would include me.
well, I understand. And I doubt they'd get Bill out of retirement for it either.
Oh, no,
Definitely not.
When did I obviously I had a dinner with Bill during the Rock Hall of Fame thing, and he certainly didn't have any desire to do it, and we both kind of agreed on that.
Sure, that's understandable. Okay, well, thanks for clearing that up, because I know that's kind of like the elephant in the room is, could ARW possibly still come to fruition when it came to an album? And that's fine. New music from you is great no matter how we get it. So I'm not picky personally.
Cool.
Okay, so I was curious about the soundtrack work, and it sounds like you squeezed one in there. Is it safe to say that you really can't do it in tandem? You kind of have to put one hat on or the other when it comes to recording your own music versus doing a soundtrack?
Well, when you're doing a soundtrack, it's unless the film you're doing is an animation, which the music gets involved right from the start. So it could take 2 years before something's done. And there's time off, and then, there's more drawings done, and then, sent to the music, and then they redo it to the music. And there's all kinds of different concepts of how that's done. But that's the only other area or, musical that allows for more time to be downtimes, should I say. But doing, the movies that I've been doing, which are, in 12 years or so, I did 50 films and I think 60 TV episodes and half a dozen themes for TV shows like TNT, NBA, and other things, baseball and whatever it was. There's just so much work that was done. And I loved it. So it wasn't like I was killing myself, but in retrospect, there was a lot of work done, but it really gives you no time. When you sign on to a film, you do it until it's finished. There's, and you're on call at all times for that film. So while there might have been times during it where there was, like it might be Christmas, and so people take a week off. Well, I would go back and start writing songs during that time, so it really leaves no time to do anything else.
Sure.
I'm definitely not deciding to stop. I love doing films, so I'll definitely do it in the future, but it's just, the schedule's now going to be dictated by me and, not my agents battering me over the head to do. I mean, that was ridiculous when I did, for example, when I did Enemy of the State, at the same time I was doing Jack Frost, and I was even appearing in a tiny way in Jack Frost. And I'm sure, I know that most of it landed on the floor because I'm a terrible actor. But doing two scores with two completely different styles of music is also kind of whiplash going from one to the other. But I love doing both movies, but there's literally, 17 hours every day, 7 days a week for months. And I just don't want to do that anymore.
Well, I can understand. An idea popped in my head, or a question. Fans of your solo albums, is there any music in your soundtrack work that might appeal to them? Was there any like where you ever just you had to write a kind of straight up kind of pop or rock kind of tune to go in the soundtrack?
There's, a lot of it is orchestral. When I say orchestral, the stuff that I mean, one of my proudest films are purely orchestral, and I think some of the best work I've done. I would say there's some score stuff that I'm, just as proud of that as I am of, any solo stuff or Yes stuff that I've written.
Oh, I can imagine.
But unfortunately, people who are fans of rock music or prog music or jazz or any of that are not people who listen to film scores traditionally. So not many people have heard the films other than going to the films. I do film scores. I've got dozens of them out, but they just demographically don't appeal to Yes fans or fans who buy my records.
Okay, well, I was just curious if there might be a little bit of overlap depending on the theme in the movie.
Yeah, I wish.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's not a bad thought, taking some of those themes and developing them into something that could appear on an album like the one I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, I kind of love the cinematic quality of Jacaranda. It seemed like your soundtrack work really informed that album. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I would definitely agree with that. I think as a musician, I think my development, if you look at it on a graph, the graph kind of went up quite substantially as far as, being around such incredible musicians and being able to write scores. And, I mean, with Yes, the only time I ever picked up a pencil and score paper was very, very on, like on Big Generator, I wrote a little string octet for the beginning of Love Will Find a Way, and a little bit on Shoot High, but mostly it's, no one in the band reads. I mean, Chris doesn't read, and it was surprising on Union, I'd written something and mentioned I'd write it out, so for Steve, and he could go back to the hotel and do it, and he said he didn't read. So it's not a criticism because Chris can't read, but he's a tremendous bass player, so it has nothing to do with that. But there's something to be said for writing some score stuff, putting it on paper, and going into the studio the next day and having it played perfectly the first time, because these people are such phenomenal readers and players.
Oh, yeah, that must be wonderful.
Yeah, and so, having done that for 12 years, it really pushed me in a whole different way, which was great, because I had always thought that I used to do a lot of it in Southern. In fact, my very first movie was purely orchestra, and, there was no MIDI, there were no MIDI keyboards. It was, you get the film, and I remember my wife, girlfriend at the time, went to a little place in the middle of South Africa, Swaziland, to a hotel, and I brought a camera with me with the reels and played it on a sheet on the room and just wrote to it, which, it was a completely archaic kind of way, but it's, it was just something, it was kind of done like that in the old days. These days, you can have orchestra sounds and make up an orchestra. What sometimes not really acknowledged or understood is that to write for orchestra, you have to have an idea of what the instruments can do, how they interact with the other instruments, the formal analysis, the harmony, the counterpoint. It's all much a part of it. If you just take full orchestra stuff and put it together without thought to the harmonic structure, it'll just sound like a very loud Hammond or something.
Oh, yeah, I could see that. Another question. While I'm thinking of Jacaranda, there's a lot of dobro on that album. Were you going through sort of a romance with the dobro at the time, or was it just a color?
I've always loved playing dobro, and I've never really incorporated it too much. I used to, years when I was like 17, 18, I used to do a lot of, my job for quite a while was just daily session work, and that often encompassed dobro, and I actually played pedal steel as well, but literally with the pedals, and I loved it. The reason I stopped pedal steel is I used to have to go from session to session, and it's a nightmare tuning it and setting it up every session. So
I can imagine. Yeah.
I just gave it up. But I love playing it. But dobro, I just love playing, and I just very consciously decided to, use dobro quite a lot.
Yeah, and a lot of times with the slide, which is a really unique sound. And it's interesting.
Actually, with dobro, I only do with slide.
Only, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, I can't remember any fretted stuff, come to think of it.
No, there's none.
It's funny. Yes fans, of course, would think of Steve Howe when it comes to slide first because he's used it so predominantly. And I don't think you actually used any slide until maybe the Talk album, like Endless Dream, the like.
Yeah, that's slide guitar though. That's not, and a slide instrument like the one Steve uses is not a pedal steel.
Yeah, it's
pedal steel. You have your pedals which do all kinds of things.
A lot of work there.
Yeah, a completely different instrument.
Yeah, Steve basically has the one you put in your lap. It's just on a stand.
I guess that's the way. I don't remember.
Lap steel. Okay, interesting. All right. Well, I'm curious about the Changes box. It's really awesome, and I was curious about your thoughts about it. It has, I believe, your first 4 solo albums. Am I right? It's Beginnings.
Correct.
Wolf. Can't Look Away, and there's one other one. What's the name of it?
There was the first one, which was, and the first one, and then the second one was Face to Face.
Face to Face, that's right, with the guitar.
And a little bit like the 90124 album. It wasn't something I came up with. Rob from with his record company had really talked me into it, and I thought, well, demos are always just an indication of where you want to go. It's not supposed to sound like how you see the master. I think it's not quite the way I wanted people to hear it. Otherwise, there's no point in doing the master and doing it completely arranged as you want to and produced as you want to. But he said, look, I think it'll be very interesting for people to hear where the ideas came from. Like the verses of Own the Lonely Heart, contrary to a lot of wrong information that was given out by the producer, the actual verse was written ages ago, before on and on the 90124, it's just a acoustic guitar and me going la da 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 kind of thing. So I thought, what, maybe it will be a good idea, and we put some other little things on there that were obviously demos. And then when he approached me about the box set, it was his idea once again, and I wasn't into it. I said, I don't know, retrospectives, and I'm not sure. I wasn't really into it, and then he really talked me into it, and by the end, I was very excited about it. He really kind of was the inspiration, or the spark that led to that even coming out.
Well, it looks like a great compilation, and the packaging is really awesome. What's the best?
The packaging is incredible, and in fact, at some point, we want to do a box set of score music, and really choose very carefully the best stuff we have. But I mean, in order to get that done, it would probably be not a 10 box, it would probably be 20 or 25 box. But that's something we might do. I might even go in and re-record some of it with orchestra, and even integrate some scores together, and just make a couple of really long suites of the score stuff.
back in the 90125 days, and there's this fabled 20-minute tune called Time that Cinema, I believe, was the beginning couple minutes of it. Can you tell us a bit
Correct.
about that? I feel like I've heard you discuss this, but it's been so long I don't remember what you said. And I guess what I'm curious about is, was the other 20 minutes as arranged as those 2 minutes that wound up on the record? And what was the rest of the song like musically?
Well, if on 90124, there's a demo of it. I don't think it's called Time. I think I called it something else on there. Oh, God, I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's a very long piece. Starts with the cinema part. It was something like, well, actually, the beginning of it is cinema, but on the song which I did on the demo I put on 90124, it starts actually with the beginning of the live version of Bone of Bloody Heart.
So that whole 20 minutes is on 90124.
Except for the beginning, which is cinema.
Okay. And Cinema was just the very top of the song, the first couple minutes, and then after that?
Yeah, that's how it started.
Okay. And how would you describe the rest of the tune musically? Does it go through some changes? No pun intended.
Yeah, no, it goes through many changes, a lot of, I think, tempo changes, time signatures, sorry.
Yeah.
Losing myself there. You know, a number of time signature things, and it was pretty interesting. And obviously, eventually the rehearsal tape somewhere, which I wish I could get. I just haven't found them, but there's tapes of me, Tony, Chris, and Alan playing it. And I haven't heard it for so long, but it's basically based on the 90124 version, which starts with the beginning of Bone of Lonely Heart.
Okay, well, we'll keep an eye out for that. Was there ever any thought of putting a longer version of it on 90125, or did it just feel like epics were kind of passe in the early 80s and best to be?
Well, no, in fact, there was really no intention to only do short songs. It's just what turned out. At rehearsal, there were, a number of really long songs, and we just didn't. A lot of those just didn't stand up against some of the songs we thought worked, which were a bit shorter. But we easily could have done a double album with 90125.
Very interesting. I was curious about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction and ceremony, and any memories you could share about the night?
Just that it was extremely long and boring.
You got to see ELO. Come on.
Unfortunately, I think I was out and getting a drink with my wife. I actually missed that. But there's no way you could see everything. It was so long. I mean, seriously, it just seemed to go on forever.
Yeah.
And then the performance was really, I thought it was not very good, and it was fun getting up and playing.
Yeah, he was awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
At the end thing was quite a lot of fun. I think we played a Neil Young song, and there was a number of guys. Oh God, what's the Rush guitarist's name?
Alex Lifeson.
Alex.
Yes,
Alex.
Yes.
Lovely guy, and we stood
is.
together and played the last song together. And a number of guys that were inducted came up and played. Yeah, I think it was a Neil Young song or something, dead simple, obviously.
Yeah, there's actually a box set out now with different highlights, and I don't think the all-star jam at the end of the night's on it, but Roundabout and Owner's on there, and it looks like they did a bit of editing to make it a little more tidy in spots.
Right.
Here and there. So.
Well, I had to come back and mix it here, and it was not easy.
Well, I think you did a good job. It sounds pretty darn good.
Yeah, no, I thank you very much. If you listen to the actual live version, from the show compared to the mixed version, it's quite different.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Question about the ARW track "Fragile." You know, it seemed like that came out with like no fanfare. Almost, I wondered if maybe it just got leaked or something. Can you tell me a bit about that one?
You know, that was really quite an unfortunate thing. We were kind of browbeaten into the promoters and everyone saying, "You've been talking about releasing a record." And I said, "Well, it's been very honest. We just haven't had the time." "Well, can't you just do a single?" And I'd written this song, "Fragile," and so we all listened to it and thought, well, it's a really nice song, so why didn't we do that? It actually appeared in a TV show I did, the Sharon Stone TV show. So yeah, so "Fragile" was something that, I had basically recorded it and re-established all the tracks, and then Rick played some beautiful piano on it, and then John came in and sang most of it. The choruses we kind of left there, and John joined in on them, and so I thought it was done quite nicely. But yeah, there was really no fanfare. It wasn't released, and it was as if it was never done. We rehearsed it, and it sounded really great, but I can't remember why, but we decided not to use it because, there's so much music to choose from, that, doing that song means leaving out something else. And so we decided,
Sure.
What the hell, let's not do it.
Did ARW ever consider brushing off "Endless Dream" and putting it in the set?
John very much wanted to do it. I really, really wanted to do it. It was a big piece for the band to use, and at the time there was very little time to get it done. Rick wasn't too keen, and it was funny. Rick thought the piano part was sequenced, but in fact I played it. It's played on, and I actually used to play it live on tour.
Yeah.
I loved the Talk tour, by the way. I thought it was just such fun.
Oh, I did
really
too.
great.
I did too. I thought it was fantastic.
Oh, well, I'm so glad you did. I mean, obviously it wasn't, Phil Carson put it pretty succinctly. His view was it came out at the wrong time, and the tour happened at the wrong time. If this had been at a different time, the album would have been differently received, and rightly or wrongly, and whatever the reason that the album didn't happen, it's one that I'm proud of, and also love the tour.
Here's a question I was wondering. On the Union tour, playing all those old Yes classics from the 70s with a lot of the guys that wrote them, did it change the way the 90125 band approached those on the Talk tour at all?
We always, the one great thing when we first finished 90125, I was against calling the band Yes. I think you probably know that, but once it was decided, I'm a team player, so okay. And Chris generously came to me and said, "Look, I understand you've written this album. We were supposed to be cinema, it wasn't supposed to be Yes, and now you're inheriting having to play all the previous stuff. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable, and you choose the songs you want to do. Listen to the catalog," because I hadn't heard it all, obviously. Well, I shouldn't say obviously, but I hadn't heard all of it at all. In fact, I hadn't heard really quite a lot of it, and so I listened to it outside of ones that Chris said don't listen to. He said don't listen to Tomato, don't listen to Drama, and some others he said, but then he said have a listen to these and see if there's anything that you like. And that's how it was kind of and he said obviously you play it any way you want. And I said, well, the only way I can honestly do it is to approach the stuff in a way that I would have played on it if I was in the band or a session musician playing it. And I will just very naturally be changing stuff, and they were very open to that. So one of the things I think that was good that happened is the old stuff kind of worked with the 90125 stuff. It didn't sound too alien playing the stuff together.
No, and I think you gave it sort of a fresh kind of angle for a new decade. That kind of.
Well, thank you. I just certainly didn't contrive to change it. I just naturally came in and did it the way I would do it. And obviously it's going to sound different, the guitar being completely different. But, I still respected and, certain parts that needed to be. For example, on Heart of the Sunrise, there were parts that the guitar doesn't play, which was just Rick going,
Yeah.
and I did that, and which changed the whole vibe of the thing, which Rick really enjoyed, and that just became the kind of nature of how we approach things.
Yeah. On the Union tour, when you and Steve had to decide on who was going to play what on those, how did you go about that? And was there anything that he was rather precious about?
I don't remember exactly what happened, but it kind of, there were times where I would, I'd just play things as I'd been playing them, and it became obvious that, well, this is kind of crazy, one of us should do that. And, in the same way that on the 90125 stuff, Big Generator stuff, or Steve would, have to not play certain stuff, but he hadn't been playing it for years on the road, so it was very different for me, because I could say to Steve, do this part, do that part. He didn't mind because he hadn't been playing it ever before. But for me, I'd been playing this stuff as the lead guitarist, so there was some points where there wasn't much agreement on stuff. A lot of it just became, we both play it and played in our own ways, and now and then it would clash, and then now and then it would be quite interesting and worthy of being the two guitarists playing.
Yeah, well, I think in the end it all blended together really nicely, honestly.
Yeah, there was some really nice, the good thing is I'd never played Awaken with a band. It's funny because it was one of the tracks I wanted to do right in the beginning, but I don't think Chris was really that keen on getting his three-neck bass out.
Sure, yeah.
But on the Union tour we did it, and I worked ways around playing, which was different to how I would have approached if the 901 band had done it. So I came up with some, I thought, cool ideas to integrate to the song.
Yeah, and then for the ARW tour, you all dusted it off and took it down a step and kind of went more orchestral with it. Is that a good description?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in fact, I wrote a piece which we integrated, which is some orchestral stuff, which we played to little parts in the beginning and the end, and obviously the guitar part's completely different to the record.
Okay, just a couple more quick questions. You worked with Roger Hodgson back in the day, and I was wondering if any of the music you recorded together might ever surface.
That we always keep in touch. In fact, it was so great seeing him when we did a show together during the ARW stuff in London. I love Roger, and we have such a great relationship, and we really spent quite some time just enjoying writing together and recording stuff. A lot of it just never got finished, and that's something which maybe at some point Roger and I should, time's getting on, so we should do it sooner than later. But it would be quite interesting. There's quite a lot of stuff that wasn't finished, and we've always talked about we should get this done, finished, and forget about where and how it's going to be done. Let's just do it and get it done.
Okay. Do you have any working title for your new solo album?
Actually, no. Nothing is yet.
Another quick question, and we'll wrap it up here in just a minute. And I really appreciate you taking the time to chat today.
No problem.
The arpeggio that's right after the solo in Owner. I've seen this.
Yes.
I've seen this in a lot of music books over the years, and it's always wrong. People always seem to play it down in the open position. And just watching you on video, you don't do it like that, do you?
No, in fact, I've watched all incarnations of Yes that have played it, obviously since I was in the band, and people just playing it, what do you call them? What are those bands? Yes.
What, like a tribute?
Tribute band,
yeah.
And it's I've never once heard it played properly.
Well, it actually is more difficult to do it down in the open position. It's kind of cumbersome and awkward.
Yeah, and it's very stretchy on your hands, and it is quite awkward.
Am I right that you start with a G power chord on the middle two strings, and you also use some open strings like the open E and A for the first part of it, and then move up to kind of around the F at the 8th fret of the A string, kind of around there?
Oh, God, let me just try and think. Well, obviously it's an open A string. I think I'm only using the middle 4 strings.
But yeah, I've noticed it's like nobody ever seems to get that right. I was in a cover band that played it a few times, and I didn't get it right either.
No, it's really quite funny, and there's a couple of parts which, like in Changes, when I've heard tribute bands or other bands playing it, also the solos, I've never heard that done, which is fine, do it another way, and it's their way, but I've never heard I've never heard it emulated.
When you do the main riff with the power chords on Owner, the opening riff, do you put in some fifths underneath it on the low E string as you're going up?
I do use the E string as the low E string as well.
Okay.
So
yeah, I thought I heard that in there.
When I'm going up the power chords, it's not just the fifths with the bottom string being A. It's also including the E string going up in fifths. Correct.
I thought so. It gives it a little extra heft.
Yeah.
So when you wrote that riff, did you think to yourself, "This is as simple as A, B, C, D"?
It's a funny thing. I wrote it in, I think, 1979 or 1980 on the toilet, basically, and I really, for a while, I thought, this is either something that's happened before, or it's not very good, or it's actually really great, and I couldn't make up my mind. I thought maybe it's just nothing. And then once I started playing it and working through it, I got to enjoy playing it more. And every time I picked up the guitar, I just naturally went and played. I said, this has got to be something. And then I wrote the chorus first. Yeah, at first I couldn't make up my mind where I thought the riff was special or not.
There's a version on 90124. It like starts with the acoustic version, and then after that it breaks into this one with a big fat synth bass doing the riff.
Right.
And there's an interesting pre-chorus, that you don't have to travel that way. It's a one-way ticket, and you ain't gotta pay. That whole pre-chorus got dropped.
Yeah.
That gave it almost kind of a summertime top-down anthem kind of quality. And I was wondering, did you have it earmarked for something more along those lines originally before Yes got a hold of it?
I wasn't sure whether that part should stay or not when I first wrote it. But on the other hand, I thought it really led into the chorus working, into the bigger chorus working, that, as you say, that kind of summery feel chorus. But when the first person to recognize it being a hit, actually, was Ron Fair, because I had taken it to RCA because I was dropped by Geffen after first coming to America, and I'd written it during that time, and they didn't really hear it, and so I started chopping it. And when I got to RCA, Ron Fair, who's obviously a kind of iconic guy at this point, having signed so many great albums and some big acts and becoming a pretty substantial producer, he was an A&R guy at RCA. And I'll always thank him for being the guy who recognized Under the Lonely Heart, because so many people didn't. I mean, Clive Davis wrote to me after I sent it to him saying that he didn't hear it, basically. I've still got the letters in my studio in the frame. but Ron actually did a version with not Julio Iglesias. What's his son's name?
Oh gosh, I'm at a loss for that one.
The kid who's the kind of rap or pop star. Someone Iglesias. He did a version of it with him and with my original version, and it's actually really good. But they didn't release it because they finished the album and it didn't make it in time. But he edited that together and spent so much time on it, and I really thank Ron for being the guy to recognize that song, because it didn't sound like other songs of, you know, Journey or that kind of, which was the stuff they were looking for at the time. So yeah, Ron was the guy who recognized it, and but you know, ultimately that part was dropped.
Okay, well, boy, it became quite the '80s classic, and it still sounds fresh,
Yeah.
fresh today, I think.
Yeah, no, it was. I enjoyed, you know, having written it. I was kind of anxious once we started to get it, you know, to get it recorded in a great way. And the interesting thing is, there wasn't a rush for people to do it. You know, it was not at the top of the list. I mean, we didn't record it for ages. I mean, the stuff we recorded first was Changes, It Can Happen, City of Love. Those were the things that everyone was excited about. But I always had this thing in the back of my head that the only thing that's going to be a hit on this album is Under the Lonely Heart. And so thank goodness we did it.
I think you're right about that. What year is your Stratocaster?
I think it's a 64.
64.
I thought it was a 62, but my roadie at the time did some research and with the number, and he said, I think it's a 64.
Okay. And when did you customize it? Originally, it was red, wasn't it, with a white pickguard?
Yeah, it was the Hank B. Marvin red guitar, and it was beautiful and brand new, and within a couple of years, I'd nicked it, and you know, there was smoke marks everywhere, and so I literally just sanded it down and painted it with just house paint, basically.
Really? Oh,
and
wow.
then
Okay.
started you know, doing some work on artwork on it.
Well, it's become quite iconic when it comes to you, much like Steve's 175. And you changed the pick guard like somewhere in the early '80s also to that more. What is it like is it like a mirrored pick guard, or is it just kind of a brush kind of black kind of one?
No, it's chrome, and I liked it. It actually makes the sound a little more kind of. It gives it a real kind of more of a metallic thing. So instead of going to your amp and, you know, putting on too much treble, which you might want to do if it's sounding a bit woolly, for some reason the pickguard tends to, you know, I hope it's not psychosomatic, but that's the way it feels to me.
No, I have one with a chrome pickguard, and it definitely has, I don't want to say it has a metallic tone, but it has more of an edge to it than the ones with the plastic.
That's a much better way of putting it. Well, I'm glad I'm not imagining it, so you have the same feeling about it.
Oh, it definitely affects the tone. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's you know, it's funny, on the 90125, the pickups I was using at first were just the original pickups, and we were having such trouble when, you know, you switch on the fuzz box, and if the lights come on, suddenly it's like the police come through, you know.
Right.
It was really
squealing.
Humbuckers were the call.
So what pickups did you swap out? It looked like there was like a red one in there, and the others were different colors. Were they like?
Yeah, there's Bill Lawrence and I think a couple of DiMarzio's.
Okay. And were those in there when you recorded the album, or did you add them later?
No, in fact, 90125 was recorded with regular Fender pickups.
Okay, very interesting. And what kind of amps were you using back then?
Marshalls.
Marshalls. Okay, so Marshalls and
Yes,
a Fender.
I used a regular Marshall bass amp because I just found it's a little lumpier in a positive way for guitar than the guitar amps.
Okay. And was that like your main guitar anyway, or was there a time when you were like, okay, I'm in Yes, what guitar should I use that would work best for this situation?
No, it was always my main guitar. You know, although I've always used different guitars on my solo albums. the very first one, a lot of it is on a Les Paul, and there's a lot on 90125, which is, I use a Barney Kessel, Gibson Barney Kessel, which I really like. And on Jacaranda, I use a 400 special, you know, that's the big Gibson.
Is that the one with the double cutaway? It's kind of like a 175 with double cutaway?
Yeah, it's a much bigger guitar, though.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've seen those. I actually have a friend that has
beautiful.
One. Yeah.
It's to me, it's the greatest kind of jazz guitar. That's, you know, what do you call them? Not solid body.
A hollow body, semi-hollow.
Yeah. To me, that's the best one. I mean, I've got a load of. I also use a Rainbow, which is basically similar to the Gibson. Oh God, what's it called? The hollow body, but it's a very thin. It's not a thick guitar. Gibson. Oh my God. I used to use it a lot on sessions. Just name some of the
Howard Roberts.
No, it's a number.
Oh, yeah. I can see it in my head, but I don't know the number.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's a much thinner guitar. And when I was endorsing the Westone, had my signature model on Alvarez, which is another guitar, which is really outside of my Fender, one of the guitars I use most. I use it on the tour a lot as well. They made a thing called a Rainbow, which was a 135 or 130.
Yeah,
135. Like Gibson 135.
Oh, 335.
335.
Yeah, you know, the typical Larry Carlton semi-hollow jazz.
Of course, the 335. Yeah. So I've got a 335, but this Rainbow, which was done for Japanese guitar, and it was just so fantastic. I go to that before any of the 335s I got.
Okay. And on Jacaranda, did you use quite a variety? I know in the video that you did, you really showed off your collection. I was curious how much of that wound up on the record.
Well, actually, what I wanted to do on that video is use the guitars that I actually played. So it's totally accurate to what the guitars I used are.
Well, that's really neat. You know, I've never seen a video done with that angle before. That's really cool.
Yeah, I thought it would be the most honest way of doing it, and it was a difficult video to make because I did it basically completely alone in the studio.
Well, it was
other than when Lou came in for me to shoot.
Yeah.
But I just learned out, you know, particularly having been involved in films for a while. I edited myself. I filmed it myself. I lit it myself. And it was really weird setting it up on a time delay and then going and playing it, then coming back looking and then going back and playing it. It was quite an unusual thing to do. I'd never done that before.
Could you imagine any of that music winding up as Yes music? Because some of the stuff on that album, I think, like Market Street and some of those others, was really progressive. And I just thought, you know, progressive rock fans would eat this up.
You've got a keen ear, because John got the album, heard the album, and I hadn't spoken to him for ages, and he called me. Well, I hadn't not heard from him for ages, because he called me some time ago saying how much he enjoyed the score stuff, and he actually really he came to a number of my scoring sessions just to sit in and watch the orchestra and us recording. And then when Jacaranda came out, he called me and he said, we should just take that album and I'll put lyrics to it and I'll just record on that. It can be the best Yes album ever. So exactly what you say is what John thought.
Okay, well then I guess he was along the same lines. You know, he did some of that when he was with John Luke Pawnee. He added lyrics to some of John Luke's classics from the 70s. So
I'm sure.
Maybe he was in that mode.
Yeah, he loves doing that. In fact, I can't remember which song it was, but there was one song when he came over, I was playing it to him. He wanted to hear it, so I played it, and immediately he started singing to it. And I thought, oh, that's an idea. You know, obviously it was a committed, instrumental album. But you're right. That could easily be taken and adapted to be a pretty interesting Yes album or prog album, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, well, prog is many things to many people, and
yeah, I actually hate the term because it suggests something very narrow, and it shouldn't be, and I don't think it is.
No, it's become kind of a commercial term, I think,
Yes.
for a lot of people.
Yes.
In the old days, I think it just meant to progress past the typical norms and to make music without a commercial intent.
Well, exactly, and I wish it could really have that connotation now, but it doesn't. As you say, it's kind of slotted into a specific area, which shouldn't be.
Oh, you're not the only one that feels that way. I know Robert Fripp bristles whenever he hears the word. He feels like it's a prison that King Crimson's been trying to break out of.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
And I think Bill Bruford, I interviewed him a while back, and he said something to the effect of, words like fusion and prog become a dirty word once the originators of the genre have moved on.
Absolutely. I never thought of that. Fusion is another term which is diabolic in a way.
Or ambient, or a lot of those. They're all kind of like little prisons in a way.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, if you take country music, that kind of there's a reason for it. There's nothing ambiguous, or you know exactly what it means, but slotting in just to try and identify something certainly doesn't work for prog or fusion or jazz rock. What does it mean? That's a silly term.
Oh, I don't know. For me, it just means, have an open mind, because anything could be there, and
I wish that the term actually meant that to, the public at large, because the way you looking at it is actually the way it should be looked at, not as some old form,
Oh, yeah, definitely not. I mean, there's bands making it right now, new stuff that I think would fall into that category.
Right.
It's like it never really ends. And even the classic stuff, there's like every generation, there's a reason people keep talking about these albums from the 70s that were made by the original bands, is because for one thing, they're just awesome music and they're classics, and it's like every generation that comes up falls in love with those records. And
you're so right. And I think one of the things and maybe it's just because I'm not as familiar, my son's a producer and he's so familiar with all that's going on today. I'm really not. So maybe I'm not seeing it in the same way as one should, but when I look at the 70s, there were bands who established their own genre, and yes, there were bands that followed and copied. But a band like the Beatles there was only one Beatles, and it sounded like the Beatles. And then a band like Yes is completely different. They might borrow from the Beatles here and there, but it's very specifically something, exactly it's going to be something completely different. And then ELO was something, at least the ELP, something completely different. So, the genres were, there was so much more important, different music that could be almost in totally different categories, but categories unto themselves.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, none of them sounded alike. And I think that's another thing where it's just like, why lump us all together under this 4-letter word when we're all so unique and original? But, I guess the thing that all those bands had in common, again, was just, ignoring commercial norms and pushing past all that. So in that way, they all kind of fall under the same umbrella, but it certainly doesn't mean they all sounded alike by any means.
Exactly. And the other thing which I also never liked about prog was the disdain for not trying to do, the disdain for commercial music, because the Beatles were commercial and I loved the Beatles. So there's a lot of, I love pop music, but obviously I much prefer classical music and doing stuff that we would identify as prog, but pop music is also valid.
Oh, absolutely. And I think a lot of progressive fans love sophisticated pop music. Groups like XTC, Steely Dan, Todd Rundgren, stuff in that ballpark is every bit as satisfying as a straight up progressive rock album. At least to me, I love them both in equal measure.
Right. Well, I guess the same thing goes for classical music in a way. It's all called classical music, but if you listen to, Mozart, who was incredibly prolific, and you can certainly hear a Mozart piece because a lot of them sound the same. If you're not really that familiar with the stuff, it can appear to sound the same. To call Mozart classical music and then to listen to Schoenberg's Verklärte Nacht, for example, it's like two completely different genres.
Oh, absolutely.
But they're all under classical music. So I guess it affects everybody.
One last question. Any ARW shows that come to mind as favorites? Any that just had really, I don't know, just stick out in your mind as being really majestic, or maybe an awesome setting that you played in?
There was a show, I can't remember where it was. It was a smallish place in Japan that was very memorable. There were a couple that were unmemorable. They turned out great, but the acoustics were tough. But I think Chicago was a particularly exciting show. But there were really a number of them. Poland, we had a wonderful show. And there were a couple of nights where Rick and I did, we do the run around on Owner in the audience and stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's a bit of a circus and everything, and it's all in good fun. But there were a couple of nights where Rick and I just really, it's almost like the audience went away and we were just jamming together, and it just lifted to a point. And I remember my guitar tech, who was kind of, he followed me around. He tapped on me to say, "You got to get back on stage," because Rick and I were just jamming, and it went on forever. I don't remember the gig that was, but I remember that happening, and it happened a couple of times, but those moments were really exciting.
Yeah, well, that was great. And that's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame box set as well. You all did it there, and you see Rick like standing by Joan Baez jamming out on the guitar, and
right, and she gives him a little kiss or something, right?
Yeah, that was great. The other rest of the audience was kind of looking like, "What's going on?" Wow,
yeah, exactly.
It's rock and roll.
I know.
It's such a buttoned up.
But a lot of the time when that happened, quite honestly, there were times when Rick and I were doing it, but we were kind of phoning it in because it wasn't really, while we were really enjoying ourselves, it just, for some reason, musically, we weren't hearing as well off the studio, even though I wear in-ears and Rick doesn't. There might be nights where it wasn't, it was kind of crapping out or something. But as I say, there were a couple of nights where it really was a special moment and a reason enough to go out and do it, because it really led us to different places. There was a couple of nights really where it was a lightning bolt struck. Rick and I, we were looking at each other across the audience and, just doing things, and I'd be going, and he would do it, and then we'd do it together, and then we'd speed up, and there was some just phenomenal nights. He's a phenomenal player.
He sure is. I had the pleasure of chatting with him a couple times in the last month, and I could just sit back and listen to him talk all day. He's got so many amazing stories.
And he's obviously the funniest guy in the world.
Absolutely. Love him. Well, Trevor, I guess we better wrap it up. I appreciate you going along with me today.
No problem.
I've been a fan of your music. My first Yes show was 1984 in a place called Bonner Springs, Kansas, outside of Kansas City.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, that's
amazing.
My first show. I remember, and I have to admit, at the time, I was kind of a dyed-in-the-wool 70s Yes fan. But boy, that show changed my mind. You won me over for life that night, definitely.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, and I love.
Yeah,
I love the 80s and 90s, yes, as much as the 70s. It's just a continuum as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I must be honest. After I was really against changing the name from Cinema to Yes right in the beginning. But after a while, you know, the old stuff which I was playing just kind of became the same thing to me as my songs. It really didn't make any difference. I felt it was mine. And truth be told, John and Chris helped me make it feel like it was mine. We were very, very tightly knit. In spite of some of the stuff, you know, like on Big Generator, there was a lot of stuff going on, most of which was resolved once Trevor Horn was off the project. And but there were some tedious moments, you know, for John on that, and I think we made up for it on Talk as far as John and I working together.
Oh yeah, that seems like the album where you guys really became a team, and
yeah,
you're the stronger presence on that album. I think it's very, very John centric.
You know, one of the interesting things, we've both got to go actually, but I should tell you, with Endless Dream, I was working on it completely alone for a while doing the rest of the album. And the first person I played it to, and Chris hadn't put his bass on, and I played a bass on it, but Chris redid it, and the drums were not Alan, and John came in, and I played him the finished thing, and it sounded very, very similar to what you hear now on the record, because the only difference, the mix is exactly the same. You know, it's just Chris is integrated, some of Alan's integrated, and Tony Kay played a bit of Hammond on it. But outside of that, I had kind of finished the whole thing outside of vocals. And the first person I played it to was John, and his son was with him, and he came in and I cranked it up to him. I said, I want to play something. And when I came to the end, he had tears in his eyes. And I said, is this part of the album? And he said, give me a copy right now. Let's do the vocal. He wanted to do the vocal right there and then. I said, John, we got to think about it. I got to tell you what my thoughts are with the vocal.
Lyrically,
and
it's
part,
otherwise.
I should say. But that was such a great moment. I'll never forget that. And it was really a great moment.
Yeah,
I'm actually going to be doing part of Endless Dream on my new album.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, the instrumental, Silent Spring, in the beginning, I have a variation of that, which I don't want to leave out, and I'm going to put it on the album. It's different, but it's the same piece.
Well, it's very interesting. Well, I'm so glad you guys got a chance to do a long form piece. You know, Yes is kind of known for these side long epics, so it was great to see what you would do in that mode. And I think that song even came to a new level live. You know, you played a lot more guitar at the end than on the studio album.
I think it's a better song live.
I would agree. And there's no official live versions out there, but there's some on YouTube. Anyway, that showdown in Chile that they filmed.
Yes,
probably
I've got that one. The solo's highly extended as well.
Yeah. Well, all those open chords and modulations are just yearning for some soloing. So live, you really made it come together.
Yeah, you're obviously a guitar player.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And you have been a big inspiration for so many years. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much, Trevor. Well, take care.
All right.
And I hope the wind blows away from your house very soon.
Oh, goodness, I hope so. Well, great talking to you, man.
All right. Take care, Trevor.
Okay,
Thank
bye.
you much. Take care.